Welcome to Career Tools. This week, interviewing on Zoom, part 3. The questions this cast answers are, what's different about interviewing on Zoom? How should I prepare for interviewing on Zoom? And how should I follow up when I interviewed on Zoom?
November 10th and 11th will be in Los Angeles at the Sheraton Gateway LAX Hotel with our Effective Manager and Effective Communicator conferences. Register today at manager-tools.com/training to join in on the action.
So having fixed all of our technology, the next thing to do, like we've done all the we've done our practice, we've sorted out our technology, we've gone into the Zoom room 5 minutes before the interview, we are sitting at our computers, smiling and sitting up and looking enthusiastic about the interview that we're about to do. And now we're going to enthusiastically interview.
Absolutely. Guys, during the interview, your answers, they should come out easily, right? Since you practice so much, right? We talked about that. You're going to have rehearsed it to such a point where you could almost do it in your sleep. So the answers should come to you easily. And that means your brain will be focused on or has the ability to be focused on your behavior, right? Mark sometimes says, guys, we'll take 90% less ability for 10% more attitude in an interview every day of the week. Right? Your interview is your opportunity to show, right, that attitude, that enthusiasm, that energy, the excitement, right, for the new role. We want the interviewer to think that this is the most exciting conversation that you have had all week, and you're eager to talk to them and show your skills.
So in terms of behaviors, first of all, that means look at the camera. And we talked about this earlier when we talked about eye contact. You have to be looking at the camera and not at the image of the recruiter or the hiring manager because where they are, where that image isn't where the image is being beamed from through the camera. So you can move the image of the person you're talking to as close to the camera as you can, because that will help you be reminded, first of all, especially if your camera has like a light on when it's on, that green light should remind you, look over here. But if you have them close to the camera, then that helps you. Even if you forget and you start looking at them, you're close to making eye contact. It's better than looking like down and away or to another screen. And that also helps you focus. If you just have the picture of the interviewer and your camera, in a small space on your screen, and you've cleared everything else off, I would go as far as to clear off the picture. Lots of people have an image as their background on their desktop. I would clear that off and just put a solid color there so that you can't even look at that. It just helps you focus on the conversation you're having and not get distracted by anything else.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's a really good point. All right. Now, next up then in the enthusiasm category is smiling. Right? Your body language, it's just muted over video, right? So even what seems like a grin on your end, right? Like a slight grin won't come across as what you feel it might, right? You can't see we talked about lighting earlier. Like the lighting takes away some of the features of your face and some of the shadowing that people would normally see in your smile, right? When your cheekbones are raised, it takes away from that. So we want you to smile through the whole thing while you're talking to your interviewer, nodding and smiling.
I was just thinking, if you watch a TV show, how close the cameras are to people's faces.
Yeah.
If there's some kind of conversation going on between two people, the cameras really are quite close to their faces.
Yes.
You don't see anything but their face, right? And we don't want you to be that close to the camera.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But you're going to think about the difference between a camera that's that close to your face and how far your camera is. And of course, how much worse your camera on your computer is versus a TV camera. And just how much is attenuated in terms of your facial expression. So you can amp it up and you'll look absolutely fine. You will not look like a clown. You'll look like an excited person.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely.
So next up, sit up straight and then answer the questions quickly. If you answer them quickly, it sounds like you had an answer. if you have to think about an answer, it begins to sound like, tell me a time when you had a great project and you have to think about it. That's kind of worrying as an interviewer. And lean forward. If you lean forward slightly when you're answering, that's another sign of enthusiasm. And what an interviewer wants is someone who's excited and enthusiastic and wants to be having this conversation, not someone who is acting as if it's, their finals at university. This isn't a grilling. This isn't like the Viva to your PhD. It's not 2 hours of someone interrogating you on, the finer details of whatever it was you learned. It's someone who wants to have a conversation with you about things that you've done and things that you've done well. So hopefully things that you enjoyed doing. And so it's about showing you can do the job, but it's also about showing what you're going to be like to work with. And nobody wants to work with the person who's kind of stoic, and that's not true. In some roles, if you're the stoic kind, you can do absolutely fine. But in general, we want people who are excited about the work and excited about doing this job and the opportunities in this job to work with us. Yeah. You're allowed to be a person in an interview. You're allowed to be the person you are. And if because of the person you are, you don't get the job, then you probably wouldn't have fitted in that team anyway. And I'm not talking about, the authenticity and, being openly you and being radically candor, having radical candor and, just, saying everything that comes into your head. We want you to be smart about this. Yes. But on the other end, we don't want you to be the interviewing robot.
Exactly. Absolutely. And guys, while you're getting to it, right? Wendy mentioned you want to quickly answer them so you look rehearsed, etc. You are allowed to say one time, "Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question because I've got a really great story I am proud to tell you." Right? Because guys, the work you've done to get to this place should be that of excitement for you, right? You should be proud of it. And we want you to be able to relax and have fun talking about your experiences because as Wendy said, this is meant to be conversational in nature. Your interview is how interviewers can glean those soft skills, right? Those conversational skills. Would it be fun to have a chat with this person over lunch one day in our lunchroom? They want to see that you can have a conversation and that you're the kind of person they want to work with. So being excited is great.
And there is a difference between nerves and being that kind of stoic person who never smiles. And when you've interviewed, you only need to interview 10 people before you can tell the difference. So if you're nervous, that's okay. And we can tell the difference. So you could be nervous and excited at the same time.
Exactly.
Our next one is expect to get interrupted. And this isn't specific to Zoom. Any interview, you are likely to be interrupted. So you start to say something about somewhere you worked or a job you were working on or a project you were working on, and the person says, "Oh, tell me, was that here or there?" Or tell me a bit more about how you made that decision. Or, all right, how many people were in the team that you were managing or whatever. So that happens all the time. That's not a bad thing about what you're doing. It's not an indication that you're doing a bad job of answering the question. It's just you've got a 2-minute answer and there's some things you're going to leave out. And sometimes one of those things you leave out is something of particular interest to the interviewer. The problem on Zoom is that it has that lag and that kind of, it's just difficult sometimes when someone interrupts. It's not in the space where you took a breath. It's over the next word. And so it's a little bit harder. So if you watch your interviewer's face, if you're paying attention and making eye contact, you should be able to see that they're about to interrupt you. So you can stop and say, "Sorry, did you have a question?" Or you can just have a slightly long pause and see if they ask something. If they look confused or they look like they have something, they're just waiting for you to say something, or they're waiting for a pause so they can interrupt, you can stop and say, "Did you have a question? Am I going too fast? Is this something, I should have included?" It's gonna be a little bit awkward if you talk over each other, but that's the nature of the communication medium that you're using, and everybody knows that it causes those awkward moments. It's kind of like when you're in a meeting room and occasionally you bump into someone, because you're not paying attention and your elbow goes flying.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's just me. But, that's the downside of meeting in a room. You can be smacked in the face by Wendy. The downside of being on Zoom is that sometimes you interrupt each other, and it just is. So don't worry about it too much. Don't think,
No.
oh gosh. We have a podcast that's about worrying about your mistakes. So if you make a mistake in an interview, the worst thing to do is to worry about it so much that you then answer the next question.
You do more
badly,
poorly. Mm-hmm.
right? And then the next question more badly. So if you have an awkward moment, you can laugh and say, well, that was awkward.
And exactly.
And then say, okay, now I'll answer your question or whatever. Worrying about the mistake you made will make you answer worse. Will make the rest of the interview go more poorly. So try not to worry about it. Try to just keep going.
Exactly.
If you're interviewing over Zoom, you're probably also managing over Zoom. If so, we can help. Our newest virtual offering covers using the Manager Tools Trinity remotely. Remote work can decrease communication and erode relationships. Learn how to combat this and manage remotely with our Effective Remote Manager virtual training. One virtual delivery with 3 hours of content at $7,500 for your group of up to 30 people. You can also bundle Roadmap and Enterprise. Contact Maggie at managertools.com for scheduling options.
All right, that takes us then to the next part of our guidance. That is to close. Yeah, Zoom or not, we recommend that you ask for the offer. Closing is the single most powerful technique that we know of in interviewing. Actually, Mark considers it the holy grail of interviewing. That is, those who close, all other things being completely equal, are significantly more likely to be successful. It is essentially the only sure way for you as the person being interviewed to own the end of the interview. Now, if you've listened to our other podcasts, we've got full podcasts on closing. So we do have more info on that elsewhere. However, closing looks like, or sounds like, I suppose, these 7 words. I want an offer, and here's why. And then after you say that sentence, you state 2 or 3 reasons why you want an offer. So what that means is, what are the things that excite you about this particular company? How do you think you can add value to their organization? It's almost like you've got a little miniature essay, kind of, a little tiny speech in a single paragraph stating why you think this role is for you.
So something like, I want an offer, and here's why. I've always admired the commitment you have to ethics. I believe in the product that you're making is going to change people's lives in the future. And I have really enjoyed meeting everybody who works here. I feel like I could work with all of them. And those were 3 things I was looking for in my next job. And so I really want an offer. Now, you have to be careful. I really want an offer does not say I am going to accept that offer. It says I want an offer so that I can consider it, right? If you go to an interview, the outcome you want from an interview is an offer, right? You don't want a job. That's not what you want. You want the offer so that you can consider it in amongst all of the other things that you have going on and all of the other things the thoughts that you have about what's important to you and what's not important to you. Until you have an offer, you don't know what the job is, how much it pays, what the hours are, where you're going to sit, all of that stuff. And all of that stuff goes into the decision you're going to make. So don't worry that I want an offer says I'm going to take an offer.
Right.
It doesn't. And I was on a call yesterday with Mark. He was doing his annual college talk to the Northwestern students. And one of them said, what if I've already been asked, why do I want this job? And Mark's answer was, well, you still close anyway. Because you can say, just before we leave, I just want to reiterate, I want an offer. and the reasons that I stated this, this, and this is why.
Right. Exactly.
So you can say it again and still own the end of the interview.
Absolutely. So close whether it's Zoom or not. And then Wendy already kind of alluded to this piece or talked about it slightly. Don't panic when things go wrong. She was specifically talking more about mistakes when you say something silly or flub up in that fashion. Here, we're going to talk more about what to do if something goes wrong technically, because it can, right? Now that it's Zoom, there's computer stuff, there's internet things, it's imperfect, we're not in the same room together. So if something goes wrong technically, so for example, you need to change a setting or adjust something, you need to dial back in because you get kicked out, we would recommend that you communicate that first to your interviewer. So if, for example, you're being interviewed, you're answering a question and you get a little warning message or you need to adjust something on your screen, we'd have you not try and answer your question while trying to make your repair at the same time, right? Because you're gonna sound distracted, right? Because your words slow down. People can tell that you're concentrating on something different.
You're looking away.
You're looking away, right? We've talked about eye contact. Your eyes are like jetting across the screen, and you're just trying to make do. So we'd have you instead say to the interviewer, "I'm so sorry. I just need to make a quick settings adjustment here on Zoom. Excuse me a moment while I fix it," and then repair it, and then go back. "Okay, I'm sorry. I've repaired it. I'm back. Let's go."
Yeah, and again, it's technology. It happens. You've done all of this preparation to make sure that you are set up for this call. And if something goes wrong during the call, it goes wrong. That's the way things are. If you lose the connection, then revert to the last method of communication that you had and send a message immediately. So if you've only communicated by email, then just send a quick email and say, "I lost you." Try and get back into the call through whichever method you can. If you've been on the phone, then you can call back or you can text while you're trying to get back in. Sometimes it's not just you, and sometimes it's not you at all. Sometimes you get kicked out and it's Zoom's fault, or it's whatever's happening at the other end that causes it. So don't think that just dialing back in might not be the answer, because the other person might not be there. And so the first thing to do is offer to reconnect. So, or at least try to reconnect and say, "I'm sorry I got kicked out. I'm trying to reconnect now. Hopefully we'll see each other." And then maybe you'll get an email back from them that says, "I can't get on. My
can't get in either.
My electric's out," whatever. Or you'll just reconnect and you'll be fine. If you know that you're not going to be able to reconnect, so for example, your electric went out or your internet went out or something happened like that, then email them or revert to whatever method of communication you last had and offer your availability when you found some other kind of connection. So for example, if your internet goes down, and we talked about having contingency plans earlier, and your contingency plan is, "I'll go to Starbucks," you can say, "My internet is out. There's a Starbucks 5 minutes from my house. I can be there in 10 minutes and we can reconnect, or I'm free for the rest of the afternoon and I'll make sure that I'm available, whatever works for you, or, I can connect tomorrow or whatever." So give them an idea of when you can reconnect, because otherwise you send them an email that says, "I got kicked off and my internet's out." And then they've got to email you and say, "Oh, well, when can you pick up?" And then you're going backwards and forwards. So try and preempt that and like minimize the number of messages by telling them what's wrong, telling them what your contingency is, and telling them your availability.
Absolutely. And then, as always, follow up. We'd recommend because for Zoom interviews specifically, you follow up immediately with an email thanking your interviewer. Now, the only reason you'd not be able to do this is if, for example, you've not got their email address. And even if you've not, email addresses typically aren't overly difficult to either find or to work out, right? Usually it's like, for example, Sarah@manager-tools.com, which is like, maybe it's also Wendy@manager-tools.com. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. So yeah.
And you can call like the switchboard number and ask for someone's email address and they'll give it to you.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And worst case, guys, we'd say if you can't work out how to get an email address and you've been struggling and you've been trying and nothing's working, worst case, you could send them a LinkedIn message because they are likely easy to find there if they're a recruiter for sure.
And even though you've sent an email and even though it's on Zoom, we recommend you send a handwritten note. If they're working from home, don't ask them for their home address because that's a little bit creepy. But you can send snail mail, a handwritten note to the mailing address where they would normally be. And that will get to them. Companies are still forwarding mail. They've got contingencies, but what do we do with actual mail? Because actually companies get quite a lot of actual mail.
I believe
Even
that.
us, we all work from home. And we don't give out our home addresses, obviously, but the company has 2 post office boxes. One which is near to Tracy, who goes and picks it up, and also one in Austin where the mail is scanned and sent to Tracy and she tells them whether or not she wants it sent on. So if you sent a handwritten card to either of the addresses for Manager Tools, they would both get to us, even though none of us live by the post office.
Yeah, exactly.
So just send it to the address you have and it will eventually get to the hiring manager. It may not get there before they've made a decision, but that's true of anything, really. They may make a decision the moment you walk out the door, even if you had a handwritten note that you put in the mail that night and it was local and it got there the next morning, you were still after it. So still make that effort. The other thing about that is it may not help you this time around. You may still be rejected, but that hiring manager, that recruiter will remember that handwritten note.
Right.
And when that role comes up again, they'll remember you. Or when when there's something similar available, or when someone in their network asks them, hey, do you know anyone who can do this? They'll remember you. So this handwritten note may not help you this time around, but it will help you. So don't miss out. Don't think, oh, we live in an electronic world and a handwritten note is old-fashioned. Yes, it's old-fashioned.
It is old-fashioned, but that's okay.
Super memorable.
Yes, it totally is. Absolutely.
And don't worry about your handwriting. I've said that elsewhere. Don't worry about your handwriting. Just think about what you're going to write slow. It'll be fine.
Exactly. All right, so let's sum it up. In lots of respect, as you have heard, an interview is an interview is an interview. Right? However it happens, whether it's Zoom, whether it's in person, what have you, at the end of the day, interviewers always, regardless of how they're interviewing, are going to expect you to be sharp, focused, and knowledgeable. They're always going to expect you to be able to talk about yourself and your experience and how relevant it is to their needs in an eloquent fashion. They're always going to expect you to ask smart questions about the role which you are applying. All that really changes, or has changed a great deal in our world, is the medium. All right, that can change. It can be in person, it can be virtually, what have you. But what the hiring manager is looking for and is trying to achieve hasn't changed at all. Right? They're trying to find out if you can do this role, if you can fulfill the technical requirements, you can fit into the team, and you have got the soft skills that would make you the kind of person they would like to work with. When it comes down to it, whether the interview is on Zoom or face-to-face or using 2 tin cans and a piece of string, you got to be able to answer the questions with examples of when you've been successful engaging in those activities. And that takes preparation.
And it doesn't matter whether they call this an introductory conversation or a final interview or anything in between. Companies call interviews all sorts of things now, which is weird. But basically, they're all interviews. Even if they tell you this is not an interview, it's an interview. And all of them stand between you and what you want. And so all you got to do is, all you have to do is all the work that we've just described. It's always a chance for you to put your best self forward and ask for an offer. So we wish you luck.
Yay, good luck.
If it's 2020 and you have been laid off due to COVID, please email us and we will arrange, if we still have them, for you to have the interview series and the resume workbook so that we can help you get back on your feet. And we're sending good vibes for everybody listening.
You betcha.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Wendy.
That's all for this week. We'll be back next week with something new.